Did you know that 60% of data breaches happen because of weak user permissions and unencrypted files? If you're using Windows, you might be leaving your data exposed without even realizing it. But what if you could lock down your system with just a few settings? In this video, we'll show you how to master Windows security settings, from managing user accounts and file permissions to encrypting your data with BitLocker and NTFS. Ready to turn your PC into a fortress? Let's get started. Microsoft Windows security setting. Fortunately, Windows has settings that make it safe to use. We have already mentioned the Windows Firewall and the Microsoft Defender antivirus. Now we'll look at managing user accounts, then how permissions on files and folders work, and finally how to protect your data with the use of BitLocker to encrypt files. User accounts. User authentication is one of the basic security measures. It allows users to prove that their account belongs to them by using a username and password. Another authentication method exists, and it is called single sign-on. It allows you to connect to multiple applications within your network that use the same authentication mechanism by performing single sign-on. This feature is made possible through the use of a network authentication protocol called Kerberos after Cerberus, the three-headed dog of Greek mythology. Users and groups. A user account is an account that allows authentication to a computer. More generally, when managing several users on a machine or on a network, users are classified according to different categories: administrator, power user, standard user, guest. The person who has an administrator user account has full control of the machine. This account is usually reserved for personnel who maintain systems. Power user has almost the same privileges as the administrator. The differences are, for example, that the administrator has access to all files, regardless of read, write, execute rights, whereas the power user would have the same privileges as a standard user. The standard user is therefore the basic user account. It does not have full control over the operating system, but just the rights necessary to perform its work. And finally, the guest account is an even smaller version of the standard user account. It is used by users who do not have a permanent account on the computer and allows you to use it without having access to personal files. Now, let's look at the Run as Administrator function. This feature allows you to temporarily grant administrator rights to an application. Usually, you right-click on the application and then click on Run as Administrator, and you then have to enter the password of the administrator account. This feature is very useful because sometimes in support, configuration, or installation tasks, it allows the system administrator to run an application with elevated privileges without having to log out of the user's account. File permissions, NTFS versus sharing permissions. There are two ways to establish permissions on files on Windows. These are NTFS permissions and sharing permissions. NTFS permissions are initially saved directly at the file system level and affect both local and network users. These authorizations are of the type full control. Users can read and edit and run the files. Editing. Users can view and edit files and folders. Read and run. Users can run the programs. Reading. Users can open the files and folders. Write. Users can write to a file or add a new file if it is a folder. Share permissions, on the other hand, allow less precise control over permissions. Since they do not rely on the file system, they also work on FAT and FAT32 disks, but only apply to files shared over the network. The authorizations are then of the type full control. Users can read and edit and run the files. Edit. Users can view and edit files and folders. Reading. Users can open the files and folders. Regardless of the type, permissions are assigned either to users or to groups of users. To change NTFS permissions, in the File or Folder properties, open the Security tab. To access sharing permissions, you need to open the properties of the file or folder, and in the Sharing tab, you need to open Advanced Sharing. You can then determine permissions based on groups or users. Finally, these two methods for setting permissions on files and folders can be used at the same time, and therefore, there could be conflicts between the two systems. To remedy this, it is simply the most restrictive authorization that prevails. Let's look at an example. If a file has full control sharing permission and NTFS read permission, then it will be read that will win. In the same way, if a file has play share permission and full control NTFS permission, it will be read that will win too. Shared files and folders. During the installation of the operating system, there are shared folders that are created automatically and are dedicated to system administration tasks. They are called administrative shares. The name of these folders ends with the dollar symbol. Shared folders ending with a dollar symbol are a bit like hidden folders for the network. They are accessible if you know their address, but otherwise invisible to other users. By typing the netshare command, it is possible to view the shared folders on the network. As you can see, the admin folder is an administrative shared folder. It ends with a dollar symbol, which means that it is hidden and not visible during a network discovery. Folders shared by users are called local shares. File permissions can be set in two ways. Self-explanatory. The user manually sets permissions on files or folders. Inherited. Permissions on files or folders are inherited from the folder they are in. If you change the permissions on a file that has inherited from those of the folder in which it is located, you have created explicit permissions. Well, these explicit permissions take precedence over those of the folder. File encryption. Windows offers a solution for encrypting data called BitLocker. This solution does not only encrypt a selection of directories, but the entire hard disk, and therefore also includes the operating system. So, if your computer is stolen or the drive is removed, your data is still protected. BitLocker requires a Trusted Platform Module, TPM, on your computer's motherboard to work. Microsoft also offers BitLocker to Go, which allows data to be encrypted on USB sticks. And finally, we will see EFS, Encrypting File System, which allows data to be encrypted at the file system level, i.e., EFS allows you to encrypt folders and files, and not the entire disk. This feature has been available through the NTFS file system since Windows 7. EFS file encryption is associated with the user account ID and password. So be careful, because if the user account is deleted, it is possible that the data encrypted with EFS will be lost forever.